Hello guys, this is Eugene from Liverman. We are continuing our series about Mauser Broomhandle repair, disassembly, reassembly, and known issues and the ways to fix them. This is part 2, mostly retained to a lower frame issues and possible fixes of them. Here in front of us we have a Mauser Broomhandle. In previous videos we talked about disassembly, reassembly, issues of the upper. So therefore this video would only pertain to the bottom of the gun. One thing we forgot to mention in the upper video was the bolt stop. We will talk about it later. So the first issue that we see a lot on these guns in the lower portion is the trigger reset problems. The trigger is often get replaced, parts often get replaced in these guns, but the mechanism of the trigger and the sear is very important, and there is a way to fix your trigger problems by reshaping the trigger. This involves welding, it involves hardening, it involves completely redesigning the back portion of the trigger. You're more than welcome to send it to us for repairs. I will not be going to the extent of the engagement of the sear and the trigger because it's a very complicated process. Without welding, it cannot be repaired. Simple replacement of triggers never work. We have a slew of triggers here. Usually we get clients' guns, we get triggers, 5-6 triggers, we try them out to see which one works better, and as a result it gives us an ability to see what geometry works in this particular weapon, and we take clients' triggers and weld them and shape them to correspond with the trigger that we tried in the pistol. The issue is that usually the frame itself would only have the trigger problem. The other very common issue on the broom handles is the grip frame behind the wood grips. What you will see on a lot of broom handles that went through Malaysia and China, they will see rust spots up here, all around the grip frame, right here, and outside where it contacts the wood. When the gun was manufactured, there was a ventilation hole that was put in by the manufacturer originally, and this ventilation hole allows not only to ventilate, but also to attract moisture. That moisture gets inside the grip, it gets absorbed by the wood and gets transferred back to metal. You'll see those rot very often. Out of the remedies that we have, we actually manufacture this bottom portion of the metal frame that we have manufactured Bolo style, shorter grips. We manufactured old style grips and the newer 1930 models with a fatter grip. So we have all 3 or 4 different types of subframes available. The fix for that is we disassemble the grips, we chop off the original subframe, put our frame in the fixture, weld it, machine it, and recreate the features exactly. And we actually could also manufacture wood grips to fit those grips exactly. Once it's done, you won't be able to tell. They are identical to the originals in every respect. And that's one service we offer. When we go through the lock frame, you will see a lot of times on the lock frames, this portion of the lock frame is getting blown off. We've seen that several times, and it's common. Unfortunately, there is no fix for it. You need to change the lock frame. The other problem that we see a lot is a split of the lock frame here. They are very hard. Germans harden them to almost 60 Rockwell, and what the fix for that is we grind the V in the crack, re-weld it with modern material that is hardenable. A lot of times we re-harden these components. We have to mill inside of it to bring it back to original shape, and we can harden it back to original specs. That would be the fix for this. A lot of times you see safeties snapped off here, and the safety could be gently re-welded depending on the fact if you still have all components to it. If not, safety could be replaced. The Sear spring pivot is a very common issue on the broom handles, and there are replacements on the market. We're currently working on the manufacturing process to create them, so we will have them available for sale very shortly. The problem with the Sear spring is once your lower is in assembly, what you want to see is you want to see that your sear is engaged, your shoulder of the sear is engaged with the sear spring, and it's springy. If it isn't springing by itself, if it isn't returning it back or not going far enough, you will have an issue with the trigger mechanism. And we do provide various fixes for replacing these springs. We currently have a process where we take your spring and we can rebuild it on the existing pin. We do sell sears themselves. They are slightly oversized to allow fitting for the mechanisms. If you have trigger issues, guys, you're more than welcome to send us the pistol. We will take care of your trigger problems on broom handles. There are several parts involved in taking care of the trigger problems, such as the trigger itself, Sear bar, Sear spring. It's very hard to do at home because you need a slew of components that you want to try in the pistol before attempting to reshape and change anything that you already have, and to see what kind of geometry changes need to be made. As well as the Sear bar, the Sear itself, Sear bar also could have an issue. You see a lot of this wear where they contact with the hammer right here. They do wear a lot of times, and a lot of times what you get, you cock the gun and your hammer will follow the bolt, therefore creating a full fire situation, slam fire situation you wanted to avoid. This sear usually is the result of that. It could be seating higher than it needs to be, and the hammer is allowed to slip underneath of it. A lot of times it's the result of Sear bar and sear not engaging with the spring, not being pulled all the way, spring being weak, sear being worn, and shoulder being eaten away. You want to take care of these issues. The only way you can do it is by welding additional material, reshaping it, rehardening it. Absolutely have to reharden, guys, because if you don't, these are very hard components under a lot of pressure. Even with being hardened, they wear after about 5, 7, 10,000 shots. And you never know when you get in the gun what kind of life it had, who fired and how much. And as a result, you might have components in it that are replaced and you don't even know about it. So when we're talking about sear and sear engagement, the other important fact is the dimension of this seat and the dimension of this round. So when they are worn, what you're going to see is if you hold the sear bar and push the sear, it will move inside the seat. You want to avoid that. There's several ways to remedy that. We do have sears that are oversized, and we fit them to oversized seats, or we can also reshape the seat, re-weld it, close it down, or even sometimes reshape and oversize your existing sear by welding material on it and reshaping it. It's possible. We do it on a daily basis. Again, you're more than welcome to call us and to talk about possible remedies of the issue. The other problem that sometimes you see is the push plunger for the sear. This end is worn or different from your gun because somebody during its life changed it. And what you see happening is your sear and sear bar during the cocking process. This is supposed to be inside the subframe, and it's supposed to push on the sear at a certain point. This could be shortened or worn. It doesn't push. Your sear does not reset. So as a result, you will have a first shot. As you fire a second shot, your hammer will cock. Your sear will not jump back into place, and you will not have a second pull. Very common, simple issue to fix. You just have to have the gun here. You would revolve this portion of the metal, reshape it, reharden it. Again, rehardening could not be emphasized harder, pun intended, because all these components are subject to wear, and you don't want them soft because they will bulge, reshape, and eventually jam the gun up. Here's a component of the subframe that's very important, and position is very important. You can put this lock in a different way, and it will eventually jam up your gun, and disassembly is possible, but very, very difficult, requires drilling and welding of your frame. You don't want to do that. When you insert the spring, insert the tension, the pusher inside, you want to insert the lock block this way so that you have that portion pointing outwards. And the reason for that, and it interacts, get this out of the way, the way it sits right here, it interacts with your lock and block. Your lock and block is seated on it like so. See, it's sitting on like so, and that creates spring tension on it. If you sit it any other way, your lock and block will eventually jump off and lock up the gun. So you have to, remember guys, you have to put it in this way. The other problem that the gun has is attributed to locking of the bolt and the lock and block. I'm gonna have to reassemble the gun in order to show you the issue. So let's pause for a second, reassemble, and we will come back into it in a second. Now this is our portion of the Broomhandle Mauser review, where we talk about issues and possible fixes and remedies of the problems with the gun. This is portion of the bottom frame review, and we had to stop and reassemble the pistol in order to show a potential issue and to show how to review the problem. So we reassemble the upper. Your bolt is under spring tension, your bolt stop is in place, the firing pin is in place, the upper is pretty much assembled, the lower is in the same position, hammer cocked, all the Sear components are in place, Sear spring is good, your Sear engagement is good, everything's tight, everything's put back together. Your first thing you want to do, lock frame assembled, take your bolt lock, you put it on, latch, and you want to check and make sure it works. It's supposed to glide over, so the way, that's normal, that happens a lot. So you glide over that. If you push and it stays, it's a problem, because what will happen, you shoot inside the gun, this will open on your first shot, the gun's returned back to the battery, and this will stay locked like so, and therefore not locking on the bolt, creating an issue with your bolt being blown back. So you want to make sure this glides nice and easy over it. Sometimes it could be remedied with a slight polish and oil. A lot of times when the bolts, locking blocks get replaced, they need to be fitted and angle changed in order for this to function correctly. Also, the reason this Sear jumped off is because when we test this, as you can see, if you watch carefully the pusher that's on the spring tension, you can see that moving the Sear. You want to see this process work correctly, because that is what happens when you fire. Your Sear is getting pushed up by the trigger, your hammer falls, your fire happens. This simulates a gun bolt being retracted. You want the Sear to be pushed away from the trigger in order to reset. If that doesn't happen, you will not have a second shot. And again, this particular part of metal wears, as well as the Sear. If you see any kind of wear, especially on the Sear edge, right here, you almost see, you see just a little scratch here, because this gun hasn't been fired a lot, but you see a small scratch on this very edge. If you see any kind of deterioration of this particular edge, you want the Sear to be either rebuilt or replaced, which we have and make and provide fitting for, and they do need to be fitted a lot of times. So now what we want to do is we want to latch this onto the upper. Again, we'll take the upper. You want to make sure that your upper piece right here is nice and tight. You put the bolt on. When you push and you pull on the bolt, you see how this lock lifts up? This is the way it's supposed to operate. If you hold this and pull, and your upper portion, your front portion starts moving up and down like so, this is fine. A little bit of movement is fine. This is a nice and tight gun. You see a lot of that motion, it will interfere with your lockup, and that needs to be addressed by adding material to either one of the components. So we're going to take a lower, we're going to latch it on. And again, if we latched it correctly, it will stay in place. It will not go anywhere. At this point, what you want to check is you want to check your lockup. You're going to be careful, because if you pull the bolt, this is going to want to jump off. What you want to check is this is going to be inside your frame eventually. So if you take the frame, put it in, this is how it's going to sit. It's going to get pushed up by the frame. So what you want to do is you want to simulate that position. You take your upper and you take your lower, you squeeze them together as tight as you can, And what you want to do is you want to take your screwdriver, this is your lock and block, and you want to push that up. If that position, in that position, you can push it up and it's moving, you have an issue. Because you're, at that point, you want that to be in the most upward position to interact with your bolt, to lock it securely. When you shoot, you want this to be locked, so when the shot happens, your whole upper assembly moves backward a little bit before it unlocks. If you have movement here, that means your bolt will open and move forward, move backwards without upper being moved, therefore creating a blowback situation you want to avoid. And that's pretty much most of our issue review on the lower. The other potential problem that you can have, let's reassemble the gun. You're going to reassemble this. It goes in, latches on, fires good. What you want to see, a couple of things. You want to check your lock on the back of the frame. The lock should be in the bottom position. And as you move the gun, you shake the gun, you do a slight push. You don't want that lock to be moved very easily. So if it's moving, wobbling, or otherwise not engaged, that means your lower portion of the Seer Bar spring is loose. You want that adjusted because that gun could open up on you when you fire. Also, not only the latch moves up and down, and that will create an issue. Another issue sometimes you see on these guns, you hold it up and you start moving the subframe, and you will see that this ears and this subframe, in correlation to the frame, it will start moving. It will have a little bit of play back and forth, because your lock has probably been replaced. You have wear inside on the frame, and what you want to do is, again, maybe send it to us or another gunsmith where the lock mechanism could be extended, therefore creating a better, tighter fit between the frame and the lower.